call to start the meeting and get that behind us while the chancellor is joining us.
Sure. Trustee Kane,
Yes, here.
Trustee Doak,
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly,
Here.
Trustee Irwin,
Here.
Trustee Gardner,
Here.
Trustee McMahon,
Here.
Trustee Martin,
Here.
Trustee Riley,
Here.
Trustee Rotundo.
Here.
That is all of the committee members present, and I do know that we have Trustee Neal joining us as well.
Welcome, Trustee Neal, and the rest of the committee members and all the others that are joining us here today. We'll just give another minute, and just for an update, there was one item that was removed from our agenda for later this morning, at least from UMaine to a site will be off the agenda, so we'll have a couple of minutes there. And to pick up and for some of the other discussions we'll have.
Is this tab number 3? Is that one you're talking about?
Yes.
Yes. And Ellen, I think we're going immediately into executive session.
That's correct.
Why don't we do that, and the chancellor can join us there, save a couple minutes.
Okay.
And I'd like to ask for a motion for the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee of the Board of Trustees to go into executive session under the provisions of 1 MSRA Section 405 6-C to discuss the condition, acquisition, or disposition of real property or economic development if premature disclosure of the information would prejudice the competitive or bargaining position of the UMaine system. Can we have a motion?
Moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ellen, would you call the roll?
Certainly. Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Doak,
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried,
Thank you.
and the chancellor has joined.
Hi, can one of the captioners
talk to me for a second? I guess the chat is disabled. I don't know how to fix that, but is there something else you need from me? Can I email it to you? Can you come off mute and talk to me? Okay, I think I've fixed the issue with the chat. If you can double check to see if you can chat me.
welcome back to the open session of the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee, and welcome to everyone. I want to remind the participants to please leave their microphone muted when they are not speaking. And we'll introduce the first item and turn the meeting over to Jim Thielen, the Vice Chancellor for Strategic Initiatives and Chief Legal Officer. Jim, if you would like lead us through the University of Maine System, University of Maine Law School discussion item.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Donnelly. I won't repeat the materials that are spelled out in the agenda information sheet for this item. This is a request for authorization for the University of Maine System to conclude negotiations and execute a lease that would allow the law school to operate in leased space at 300 4th Street, downtown Portland. The request, the authorization is to negotiate a cost for the lease that is under $960,000. We currently have a stated letter of intent that would fix the annual lease cost at $957,000 and a little bit more than that. I don't have the exact number right in front of me. But we are seeking authorization to be able to execute that lease. There's a lot of information provided in the agenda sheet that I won't repeat here, as I know the trustees have read it. Happy to answer questions, but I think it might be appropriate to have Dean Softly just take a minute or two to explain the strategic purpose served by the move, not only for the law school, but for the Maine Center, the University of Maine Graduate and Professional Center, and the opportunity that the space would allow other UMS use as well, that would offset some of the lease costs on the law school's own budget.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Thielen. Dean Softly, would you care to make a few comments for us?
Thank you, Trustee Donnelly. I appreciate the opportunity. This opportunity for the law school to move into leased space in downtown Portland will, from my perspective, change the trajectory of the law school going forward. The current building limits the size of the class, it limits technology, it has prevented us from allowing many of our students to engage in high flex classes because the building is so old, and we have been unable to upgrade, notwithstanding the enormous efforts made by the system or the chancellor's support to get the technology moving forward. There are so many problems with the building that the cost moving forward would be in the millions to stay in it. And the ultimate plan is to raise that building and build another one that will accommodate everyone. This move into leased space in this interim period will allow the law school to grow during this period of time. It will allow us to access much improved technology, and it will provide the law school, the Graduate and Professional Center, the new MBA program, which is just thriving, and several other partners within the system, the opportunity to collaborate and really provide vibrant, modern space for our students, which is what all of us are looking for. This period of time, this interim period, will allow us to design the full building with all of the collaboration spaces necessary. And it will, I believe, really be a game changer, both for the law school and for all of the systems that work together with the collaboration that is now actually really showing up through unified accreditation and through the Alphon gift. I'm happy to answer any specific questions that anyone has about this proposed change, but the change would really move us forward by leaps and bounds.
Thank you, Dean Softly. Are there any questions from the Board of Trustees for Dean Softly? You had him at hello. I thank you very much for that, and I want to welcome a special guest today, Senator Mills, who we know is a huge advocate for the law school, and appreciate you joining us here today to being the cheering squad and right up front and center, trying to raise money for the law school, as well as being a great supporter. So welcome, Peter. Next, we have, any other questions or comments, Board of Trustees?
Chair Donnelly, can I make just
Yeah.
a final observation? I do want to note for the committee, we are talking about a lease that would increase the operating costs for the law school. And we certainly understand with respect to the committee's primary jurisdiction relative to approving our budgets, that needs to be factored in and accounted for. And certainly we would expect over time to develop budgets for the law school that come into balance. I just want to acknowledge that would be an important consideration for the committee and put that out relative to your consideration of this request.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor. That is important. And it's roughly, if Vice Chancellor Lowe can correct me, I believe it's about $1 million swing in the budget and to the negative. But the facility will give the opportunity for the law school to grow and thrive going forward. And so the hope of this committee and the staff is that we'll work together over the coming periods to build out a trajectory to where the law school comes in at a balanced budget sometime in the future, to be determined when we work together and figure out what that can be. Ryan, did I have that half right?
Yep.
All right. Any other questions or comments on that? Any thoughts, Chair Irwin?
Yeah, thank you. I guess the first very short observation I would make is I'm not, I know this is set, the way the resolution currently reads is for this to go on the consent agenda at the May meeting. I'd be interested if other board members think that's appropriate, or if this is of a kind of magnitude where the public deserves a discussion by the whole board and consideration for the extra few minutes that it takes to do that. My inclination would be to ask that this not be placed on the consent agenda, but rather be its own agenda item. So that's my first point. My second one is I just want to capture what I think are the implications of what lies in front of us. As the board and I think everyone else here knows, we appointed a task force in 2019 to help identify and articulate what the path forward would be for the law school, which was suffering from the, to counter, I should say, the devastating impact of discounting caused by a national market of reduced demand for law seats, law school seats. And that task force did its job, it did a terrific job, and gave us a vision for growth that included how to enhance its engagement with the graduate and professional center. We've moved, the board made a commitment based on that report, and we made a commitment in hiring former Chief Justice Softly to see that this law school did receive the support it needed. And this lease is a critical first step for that, but it's only a first step. And we need a plan to fund the law school at a competitive level in order for that commitment to be fully realized. And I know we're not there yet. We're making some good strides this year, but we're still far short of where we need to be. And I know the chancellor and the board are committed to making that happen over the next few years and as soon as possible. But I think it's important to note for the public record that this is not just oops, we got to get a better building. This is part of a pathway towards a sustainable, vibrant, innovative, distinctive offering in kind of a new legal education marketplace. And so I strongly support this, but I want everybody, I want it to be clear what the implications of this are. This is a much bigger deal than just moving to another building. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Irwin. Yes, Vice Chair Gardner.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to say I'm very impressed and supportive of the work that's been done. If you go back a year or so, faced with the challenges of where do we go with a law student, where do we stay, and to come up with this option that we're now looking at, I think has been a lot of good work and a lot of solid debate around what's the best path forward. But to the points that Chair Erwin just made, I do see it as a step, not the end step, but a step in the process of building a stronger Maine law school and being a bigger part of the University of Maine system and University of Southern Maine as we look at the Graduate Center. And so I fully support Chair Erwin's points around we need to keep in mind and ask for how does this all fit as we look at it each of the years into the total end state of a graduate center with a law school in a final location and fully funded with a budget that balances. Those are key points that we need to keep in front of us each time we take another step on this program.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gardner. Any other trustees, comments or questions? All right, I'll read the text of the resolution that the Finance, Facilities and Technology Committee forward this item and at the request of Chair Erwin on the agenda, but not on the consent agenda at the May 24th, 2021 Board of Trustees meeting for the approval of the following resolution. That the Board of Trustees authorizes the University of Maine system to negotiate and execute a lease agreement at or below the not to exceed cost stated herein as the temporary home for the law school, contingent on and subject to the review and approval of the terms and conditions by the University of Maine System General Counsel and Treasurer and the Finance, Facilities and Technology Committee and the Board of Trustees. Can we have someone make that motion? Moved by Chair Erwin, seconded by Chair Trustee Riley. Ellen, would you call the roll?
Certainly. Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Doak,
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
Trustee Erwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
yes,
The motion is carried.
Thank you, Ellen. And next up on tab 2, we have the FY 2022 proposed operating budget and student charges. It's the second reading, and Vice Chancellor Ryan Lowe will walk us through that. Good morning, Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to share my screen here. And we'll get started. Excellent. Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. Excited to be here to present our second and final reading of the FY22 budget. Want to start by thanking the presidents and the campus teams for all the work that went into getting these budgets in a position to present them to you today. It's not an easy time to be preparing budgets just because of the timing of the pandemic, even though it's only been, feels like forever, but it's been what, 14, 15 months. That 14, 15 months has impacted 3 fiscal years. And so, kudos to the finance teams for all of the work that they've done. Also want to thank the chair who has made himself available for several conversations, added an extra meeting in April to get the committee even more of an opportunity to dig in, and has provided great advice as we've gone through this process. So I'm going to go through the budget this morning. This is about a 20-minute section. We do not have the individual campus presentations at this second reading. So no better place to start than a reminder about our budget schedule. I'd like to talk about it in roughly 3 phases. That first phase is the July through the end of September phase, where we do a lot of work internally with the chief business officers at all of the campuses to develop some of those, kind of top line assumptions that will ripple through all of the campus budgets. And so, I've noted here a couple of the big ones, certainly compensation and benefit rate. are significant portions of our budget, more than 70% and even higher in some cases, but also things like workers' comp and other insurance rates, legislative allocation, and so on. The second phase is that October through January window. We really refer to that as the campus budget development phase. That's the phase when the campuses take those assumptions, they build in their staffing and their enrollments, and they have lots of campus conversations about those budgets. And then we're in that, what I'll call the third phase, which is really the trustee phase. We start again, late March, we had the first reading with the FFT committee. We had another meeting on April 9th, and that gets us to today's FFT committee vote. We'll wrap this up later in the month when we'll be looking for a full vote from the trustees. One thing we've learned over the last, certainly the last couple of years in dealing with COVID is that we do need to make adjustments often. So it is likely that at some point before the end of the fiscal year, or maybe slightly after the fiscal year, that we would be back with supplemental changes in the event of an increase in legislative appropriation or other big changes like that. So budget highlights and themes that you're going to hear from me this morning. I'll just touch on a few of these. We are using federal funds. Very grateful for the support of our congressional delegation. They are being used largely in FY21, but also in FY22 to cover COVID-related expenses and lost revenue. I'll note that state appropriation, as it is currently proposed anyway, is being held flat at FY21 pre-curtailment levels. That appropriation is now about 42% of our overall E&G budget. Residence hall occupancy rates remain below full capacity, contributing to some of our auxiliary challenges, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail as we work our way through the presentation this morning. The Gordian Sightlines data continues to show some challenges, but I will say I think this budget represents the first real progress that we've made in moving that needle certainly in my time at the system. So want to acknowledge the challenges, but also acknowledge the great work that the campuses have done in prioritizing renovation in the upcoming budget. And then, as we are with the federal support, extremely grateful to Governor Mills and to the legislature for their support during this pandemic, providing nearly $15 million in funds to partially offset testing, PPE, and some quarantine costs. Other highlights, FY22 budgeted credit hours are above FY21 budget and above the actuals. And again, we'll have a slide on that. We are recommending a modest 2.5% increase in in-state tuition. Unrestricted capital investments, as I noted, are up by $4.5 million in this budget, about 20% increase over FY21. And I'll talk about some of the budget balancing on this next slide right here. So using a variety of options, spending reductions, campus and system reserves, federal dollars, each of the campuses is presenting a balanced budget for FY22. You can see that on the spreadsheet if you move all the way over to the right. Want to be clear, though, there's still work to do. We remain hopeful that the COVID impact offset in FY21 and 22 largely by federal funds, that impact will phase out, that students will return to dorms, that occupancy rates and dining revenue, ticket income, all of those will bounce back to pre-pandemic levels. Focusing in on the chart, and I'll work my way left to right. You can see here that nearly 6 million of the overall starting gap of about 8 million is on the E&G side. That is a shift from what you saw in fiscal year 21, where we were looking at the March forecast at about a $25 million deficit. About 3/4 of that was on the auxiliary side of the house. So we have kind of shifted that loss, if you will, over to the E&G side and minimized it. That's a reflection of increased occupancy rates. It's also a reflection of a full schedule. Recall last year, we left early in the fall or this fiscal year, last calendar year. We sent students home before Thanksgiving. That resulted in about a 20% refund to students. That contributed greatly to auxiliary losses in the current fiscal year. The gap, again, as you can see here, is resolved by a combination of resources, largely through CARES Act transfers at 3 campuses, at Farmington, at Fort Kent, and Presque Isle, and 2 budget stabilization transfers from the system, one to Farmington and a second one to Maine Law. I'll also note, kind of consistent with where those budget stabilization transfers are, and I think it's a positive if you're looking for positives in here. 95% of that E&G gap exists at just 2 of our campuses, at Farmington and at Maine Law. We've spent some time in previous meetings and even earlier this morning talking about the plan that President Cerna and his team has to get Farmington back into a stable situation. And again, as I noted, we've spent a little bit of time this morning talking about Maine Law, the challenges there, and our plans to get that back into a balanced situation. So I do think there are some promising things looking forward if we're able to put in place some of the changes that we've talked about.
Chair? Chair?
Gardner?
Yeah.
Yes, Vice Chair Gardner.
Just a quick question, Ryan, on that prior slide. I think it's terrific to see UMaine balanced all the way across and not having to draw. But I guess my memory was that they did have some struggles in the first roll-up. And so should we imply here that they've solved their problems without having to draw on any reserves?
For FY22, absolutely. For fiscal year 21, the current fiscal year that we're in, they do have some substantial budget challenges, as you would expect,
Right.
heavily impacted by COVID all the way across their organization. But for 2022, President Franny Monday, Joanne have done some great work, and as you noted, balanced across both E&G and auxiliary.
It's terrific work. I'm impressed. Very good.
And Vice Chancellor, though, this also includes the tuition increase where the first roll-up did not, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, 2.5. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll touch on budget stabilization fund. I think, as most of the committee knows, the fund was created to help us smooth out the financial impact of some of our challenges. The trustees that have been around for a while will know that campuses come in and out of this. So I think during my time here, we've done budget stabilization transfers to nearly every campus across the system. Earlier in March, I presented an updated FY21 budget forecast to this committee. One of the budget adjustments we made to the current year budget was to recognize the additional round of federal support. So as noted here, that original budget assumed a transfer of about $4.9 million to Maine Law and Farmington. You can see that in the left column of this chart. Because we want to exhaust federal funds before we start using reserves, we're removing the recommended transfer to Farmington in 2021. That would be replaced with federal funds. And then we're shifting that support that the trustees had given in last year's budget into 2022, but at a reduced level. And that's a reflection, again, of federal support that Farmington is receiving. At Maine Law, the 2021 transfer is smaller. You can see it's decreased from 1.9 down to 1.3 million. So great work on the part of Dean Softly and Nicole in managing that budget. And then the gap in 2022, as we discussed earlier this morning, is about 2.5 million. Prior to year-end investment returns, and as a reminder, that is how we replenish this fund. Investment returns are looking very good for the current fiscal year. I don't want to talk about it any more than that for fear of jinxing it, but not Not counting that potential investment gain, we have a budget stabilization balance now of about 6.6 million. That is as low as that balance has ever been. So keep your fingers crossed on the market. State appropriation. So again, this is simply showing historical state appropriation going back 12 or 13 years. As I noted earlier, state appropriation is flat in this budget at pre-curtailment levels. So again, we were like a lot of state agencies, we had a $2.2 million reduction as part of the curtailment that was put in place earlier this year, but this brings us to essentially flat pre-curtailment levels. The governor's budget does keep that number flat for the upcoming biennium. We do know that the Education Committee recently recommended a 3% increase to our base appropriation in both of those years. And we know that the governor's office is working on a supplemental that is due out next week. And we remain hopeful that we could potentially be looking at additional appropriations there. We certainly won't count those until we see them in a budget, and then we go through a process, but are grateful for the consideration as that moves forward. Also like to note the Maine Economic Improvement Fund. So
Can I ask one question about that state appropriation piece?
Absolutely.
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you so much. The I'm going to cross all my fingers for all of it, for sure. State appropriations, market otherwise. But the question is, if that happens, are you going to bring back to us an updated version of this budget? Because that would be great news if we got 3%, and certainly would provide relief to many of the initiatives, I would think, across a lot of the campuses that we heard about when we did the campus by campus breakdown. What will be the process for getting those updates in the?
Yeah, so great question. We would bring something back. It would likely not be until after the May trustee vote, as several of you are very familiar with the legislative process and the appropriations process. Even if we're fortunate enough to be included in the governor's supplemental, we can expect several weeks of hearings, probably going right up to the end of the fiscal year. So likely what we would do is present the budget as recommended here, barring any changes, to the trustees in late May. We would look for an affirmative vote then, and then we would kind of crack it back open, if you will, maybe in June or July, and have our own form of a modest supplemental where you might see money coming in and reductions or other proposals or new initiatives coming back in.
Okay, thank you.
That will be a good problem to have.
Amen to that.
Maine Economic Improvement Fund, as noted here, it's at 17.35 million. It has been flat funded for several years. Again, in 22 and 23, you can see the campus allocations working from left to right on this chart. You can see the allocations by sectors as well, going from top to bottom here. About 13.2 million of that total goes to Orono, 3.3 million at USM, a modest amount to Machias, and then we have the small campus initiative, which is roughly $500,000 a year. It's a competitive award program. Want to thank President Farini Monday, and her team who have stepped in to help administer that, help us go through the process of awarding those grants. By them stepping up, that's less money that we have to pay an outside firm to do that, which means there's more money in the pool for our smaller campuses. And so greatly appreciative of the president and her team's efforts here. So UMS enrollment, briefly. So total system-wide credit hours are up modestly, about 0.6 over FY21 actuals. In-state credit hours are up slightly. Out-of-state is down by about 3,000 credit hours. That is a reversal of recent trends. We typically are down in in-state and up in out-of-state. That in-state growth is largely attributed to the increase in CBE and AP that you see on the far right, lower right-hand corner of the slide. I'll also note while I'm here that early college is down. That is not a reflection of demand, but instead a reflection of budget. So the state covers half of this cost. State costs are flat, or they're actually declining because of some one-time revenue that was used in the current fiscal year. So, you know, if it was just based on what campuses are seeing and demand, this is a line that would likely be going up. Simply, there aren't the resources on the state side to increase at the rate that we've been seeing in recent years. Residence hall occupancy rates have proven to be one of the most challenging issues to budget over the last 2 fiscal years. The charts here will show you total capacity. So how many students can we fit in the rooms on our campuses? We also show COVID capacity, which I think is what you see here in red. And that's the total capacity reduced by distancing requirements and bathroom capacity. And then finally in gray, we show the actual number of residents that that we are budgeting. We expect to budget at 89% of COVID capacity in the upcoming fiscal year. That is up 20% from 2021. But as you can see, it's still down 10% when you look back at the last full year that we budgeted. So FY20, our normal occupancy was at 91%. Even with the increased capacity, we're still at about 81% in FY22. And again, that varies by campuses as you would expect. I'm going to talk a little bit about tuition rates. If I could exclude UMaine and UMaine Machias for a minute, and I'll get to that in just a second. You can see that we are recommending an in-state tuition rate as well as out-of-state at 2.5%. It shuffles between 2.4 and 2.6 because we like to do this in whole numbers. So there's some rounding here. The increase here would apply to all of our campuses with the exception of Maine Law, which as noted here would stay flat. So I do want to touch on some tweaks that we're recommending. We'll see some in the form of 2 pilots, one at Orono and one at Orono and Machias, and then a second one at USM. Several weeks ago, we stood up a small task force, about a dozen of us representing all the campus and various constituency groups. The goal was to look at the current tuition and fee structure and explore whether other options might exist compared to those current practices that produce really long and really complex bills, ones that lack transparency, and certainly that can be very challenging for families to understand. So the proposal, to sum it up briefly, would roll up all of the various fees that we charge and roll them into a tuition rate. So students had simply one charge appear on their bill. With the exception of this, 2 fees would remain at Orono and Machias, a student activity fee and a technology fee. At USM, it would be a little bit different. So think of the same process, but think about it in 2 steps. USM would continue with the tuition that they had last year with the modest 2.5% increase, but would look at rolling up all of their fees into a single comprehensive fee. And I'll show you the detail on both of these proposals in the coming slides. So at the University of Maine, you would see the traditional in-state per credit hour rate here. When you roll up all of those various fees, the adjustment would be about $80. So the fee, the in-state credit hour rate would go from $308 to $388. $398 after the tuition increase. We would maintain, as I said, the student and the technology fee. And so this is the big change here. These are meant, these are all revenue neutral. So this is really in the interest of being more transparent in our billing. It's one place where the legislature has taken a particular interest. Sam and I have participated in sessions where legislators would show us a campus bill, that was this long or several pages front and back, and asked us to really address transparency around that. And so this is our effort to do that. The campus, in this case, President Farini-Mundi, Joanne, others have spent a lot of time shopping this around the campus, has spent time talking with students about it. Again, it's revenue neutral, but does present things in a much more transparent way, easier for students to understand.
Brian? Brian? Question.
Sure.
That fee roll up, every student had all those fees in different buckets, and so the roll up will be just that, a roll up, or were there some students when you had a more defined breakout of the fees that didn't have all the fees because of the course or the way theirs? And so I guess my question, you're talking about being revenue neutral, but I'm wondering, is it cost neutral for all the students based on the fees they either had or didn't have?
Yeah, I'd say generally, yes. It's always going to be subject to, that was the goal from the start. And so that's where the campus is focused in. It's always going to be subject, though, to a student who maybe this year was hadn't declared a major, and then next year, if they decide they want to be an engineer, well, they're probably going to have, they might have differential tuition, or they might have a course fee that they wouldn't have had in another class. But I think generally, I feel pretty comfortable saying that's where we ended up. You'll see it even better in a slide that's going to come up in just a second for at USM.
Thank you.
So again, not much new information here. The same impact. This one happens to be on the online rates. So again, you see the $80 adjustment. At Machias, it's a little bit smaller, as you would expect. Not as many fees. So the adjustment at Machias is $37, which gets them a new in-state rate of $289 after the adjustment. And then finally, and I think this is the one that illustrates it, to your point, Trustee Gardner best, this is the USM proposal. So again, for USM, they would still have the traditional tuition that they've had, but this is what it would look like on the fee side. So you see FY22 current. This again this just might be a typical student, but you can see an example here of what a bill could look like. If you've got multiple, if you're a business major that has online, there are course fees attached with that, this could be substantially larger. It could be 5 different fees that are attached to that. So you're going from something that looks like this to the FY22 proposed, which again rolls everything up into a comprehensive fee. We still have the student activity fee. This one actually shows a modest decrease, but the idea is that these are generally revenue neutral. You see the same thing over on the graduate side. So in this example, the students might actually save a little. There could be examples, again, depending on majors, where the cost might go up, $100 on the other side of it. But again, I think the hope and the thinking is that these will be revenue neutral proposals, and really, again, go to addressing some of the concerns that we've heard from the legislature. And quite frankly, we've heard from our own staff how complex it is to put together these bills for students.
To be revenue neutral, it means you got to average the cost out. So some students will see different costs, higher or lower. Has that been vetted fairly well, and people feel that that's not going to be a problem?
It has. We've had lots of conversations. If you're interested, I'm sure President Farini-Mundi could talk about some of the communication that they've had at Orono and Machias. I know this is something that USM has been focused in on. The reaction that we've had so far from all of the communications has been very positive, both on the administrative side and on the student side.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I could
Great
just add
question.
that we have been working with student government over the course of the year on this. The response from the student government was strong in the positive, in the sense that they felt that the more unified you could be about a fee, the less sort of, I guess, nickel and dime that they felt, even though it was the same fee. But you're absolutely right, Trustee Gardner. This would probably be, for some students, it might be a little bit more, a little bit less. One of the bigger pieces of conversation we had to have actually was faculty, because they believed that they owned these program fees and these course fees. And so they had them squirreled away in their own accounts in some cases, actually technically not, but they thought they did. And so that actually turned out to be the more difficult conversations, in which we said, you need to budget it. It will be part of the overall USM budget, but this is not your, it's not your enclave or your domain entirely to be able to control. So that's where we had probably the more difficult or just the more pointed conversations. But even the faculty, I think, are mostly in a good place on that.
Okay, I think I can get through these next few slides pretty quickly and get me to the question phase. Again, looking nationally, this is a 5-year percent change in in-state tuition adjusted for inflation. Certainly know it's been a focus of the trustees for at least the decade that I've been around to limit increases. We've been frozen tuition as often as we've increased it. You can see here again, adjusted for inflation, tuition has gone up just 2% over the last 5 years, compares very favorably to our New England higher ed colleagues and below the national average. We've tracked in-state tuition as a percentage of Maine personal income, per capita income for some time now, going back to at least 2010. We have seen that decline every year since 2013. So we do think that the tuition, in-state tuition, continues to be very affordable in Maine. We've used per capita income. Similar, you'd see a similar looking graph if we looked at median household income in Maine. That has grown substantially over the last 2 years, about a $15,000 increase in household income from 17 to 19. At the same time, tuition has remained relatively flat when adjusted for inflation. So we think by any measure, in-state tuition continues to be very affordable for Maine residents. We've had a focus this year, as we noted early on increasing our investments in facilities. This budget is an absolute step in that direction. I noted earlier a 20% increase in capital investment. The budget funds depreciation at 67%, which is a 12% increase over FY21. I think what I'll just quickly note, because we do have the 1-year capital plan a little bit later in the agenda, but do want to let you know the detail is here if you're interested. So I draw your attention to the 15.6 million that we note there for capital investment. If you start going through the pages again, you can tie those numbers out here. So you look in the lower right, you can see the 15.6 million again. You can see that by campus and by project all the way across. And then you can start to get into the individual details. So again, if we go back here and we can see UMA, for instance, at the 941,000, and we want to see the detail on that, we can scroll to this page and you can see the 941 at the bottom of this page. You can see the 5 projects that make that up. The split between E&G and auxiliary, in this case, it is all E&G in the case of UMA. And then you can see the projects again as you work through all of the campuses, and it brings you back down again and ties back out. You can see the 15.6 million down in the bottom right. So we'll have a little bit more on this as our last agenda item today. So I won't spend too much time on it, but again, this gives you the detail that we've been talking about for a couple of months. can go through these last through very quickly because they're simply a roll up of numbers that you have that you've seen before. So this is the proposed budget for E&G. Just note 50% of the E&G budget on the revenue side again is tuition and fees, about 42%. 41% is state appropriation. We often note that our expense budget is heavy on personal services. In this case, it is about 72%. One of the things that you'll note on all three of these slides, these rolled up versions, there are some pretty wild swings in the change column. And that is a reflection, again, of my point at the beginning, which is we've had COVID impact three budgets, FY20, FY21, and FY22. So in some cases, what might look like an increase, so for instance, let me just pick one out, travel, you can see is going up modestly. So you might think, wow, why are we increasing travel? That's really a reflection of FY21 being so low. If you go back to FY19, we were spending $8 million on travel. If you look at other lines, you'll see similar jumps. Sales and services up at the top. In 2020, it was 43 million. In 2019, it was 48 million. So most of these are on their path back to what we've seen more as more traditional numbers. That you're used to seeing. The auxiliary budget, 85% of our auxiliary revenue comes from dining and residence hall revenue, which is why that was so heavily impacted in 2021. About 67% of our auxiliary expenses are personnel. On the E&G and auxiliary side, so this is the rolled up version of our $572 million expense budget. Again, a couple of highlights, about 36% overall is state appropriation, about 67% is compensation. Then the final slide that I have is, again, a reminder, the travel numbers included here are the same ones that you saw on the slides just previous to this. But as part of Public Law 2011, Chapter 616, the board is required to approve annual budgets for travels, meals, entertainment costs. So we like to pull those out as part of the budget presentation, make sure the trustees are aware of those costs. And that completes my presentation this morning, Mr. Chair. I apologize for going a few minutes long, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Lowe. Are there any questions of the trustees? I think we had some questions along the way and covered that. I'll read the text of the resolution that the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee approve the following resolution to be forwarded to the Board of Trustees for approval on May 24th, 2021 board meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee and approves the FY 2022 proposed operating and capital budget, recommended the student charges, and proposed transfers from institutional reserves, including budget stabilization funds. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved. Is there a second?
Okay.
Thank you. Ellen, would you call the roll?
Certainly. Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Doak, Trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you, Ellen. The next item, which was tab 3, has been removed from today's discussion. So that will pick up 10 of the 20 minutes that we're over at the moment. And so I appreciate that. And I will ask the presenters going forward, if you could speed up your presentation just a little bit so we can finish on time. It would be much appreciated. If we each do it, it's only a minute or two each, and that would be great. Next item to be, and with that, We'll move to tab 4, Wadeen Hall renovations at University of Maine Presque Isle. And we have President Ray Rice to present. Good morning, Ray.
Morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll do a brief introduction and then turn this over to Deb Rourke and the rest of the team here that can supply more information and answer questions with much more detail than I can. But I just want to point out that this renovation of Wadeen Hall to the amount of $3.7 million comes from bond funds primarily. It will need some additional funds through fundraising that we already have preparations for. And this is essential to improvements to Wadeen Hall, particularly in regards to NAV issues that you just heard about in previous discussions. This also is part of our broader campus plan that we finished 4 years ago. It includes the PPP proposal for a new dormitory. Really, this will provide us essential, I would call it, certainty and our ability to stabilize our in-state enrollment in particular, and in particular with our subset of athletes. That is a growing group of students on our campus. Ever since we joined the NAC conference in Division III. And we quickly identified that our biggest challenge in that regard isn't so much some of our NAC sister schools, such as the great University of Maine at Farmington, or some of our other sister schools outside of the NAC conference, such as University of Maine at Fort Kent, just to our north. But really the private schools that have been recipients of funding that has allowed them to update their athletic facilities and their dormitories, namely Husson and Thomas, that are both in the NAC, that are able to really showcase their facilities to athletes. And within the state of Maine, that has really given them a advantage over some of the other Division III schools. As good as our records have been this past year, even in the pandemic. By the way, it looks like we're playing a playoff game against, our softball team is playing a playoff game against Thomas on Friday afternoon, which we hope to win. Then we'll be in the finals for the NAC in that regard. So what you're seeing is our proposal for really important improvements in Wadeen Hall to bring us up to standards in Division III within the NAC conference. This will really focus on our gymnasium, the flooring, and particularly the roof to ensure that we have long-term viability for the structure. So again, this really is an important critical piece of our overall enrollment strategy for in-state Mainers. It is also, it's a phased project. So what you're seeing is the phase 1 of the project and perhaps the start of phase 2. And it allows us to build out to an overall renovation of the entire facility over a period of time, but to really put the focus where it needs to be for student retention issues. With that, I'll turn it over to Deb Rourke and the team.
Thank you, President Rice. Good morning, Chair Donnelly. We'd like to call upon Jacob Olson, who's the construction manager for us, just to give you a really high level view of the work that will be done. And then we can answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you.
Also on our call, we have Joe Moore, with our facilities director, and Betsy SB, our CBO.
Yes, thank you, Debbie. This renovation with the bond money will focus on bringing the roof and the structure of the building up to code, along with the mechanical and electrical systems. We're starting with a new electrical service this summer, which will be going out to bid soon. And then, as you can see in the document, the structural renovations in the new roof will be starting next spring as soon as possible to be complete prior to the home basketball schedule of 22-23. But these upgrades are necessary for student retention and for building code. And as was mentioned, more money is needed, but that's what is going to be raised for the complete build out of the space.
Thank you, Jacob. Any other, are there any questions of the trustees? Trustee Riley, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. This is a little preemptive of our later discussion, but I think it's a poster child for some bigger needs for us. And I make this comment with all respect for what President Rice and his team has done and the importance of getting up to code. But it raises for me, it's a great way to think about where we need to go next. We clearly have done a great job in this budget, I think, looking at maintenance and capital planning, but I think we need a longer plan. I'm thinking it's sort of over time, where do we want capital investments? We know from sightlines that UMF and UMaine Machias have very old buildings, 60+% over 50 years old. Umpy's in the 40% range. We know that we need $50 or $60 million a year to keep up with the NAV. We know from Glenn that residence halls are really important around retention and recruitment, and yet we see, particularly at the University of Maine, every single one of those, pretty much all the dorms are identified as buildings in dire straits, and here we are raising room and board. So I think the question this begs is, if we look at the whole system, would this project be a high priority compared to the other needs? And I don't mean to stop it here. I know that we need to do more planning, and I apologize to President Rice for using him as a poster for this, but I think and clearly this is an old building that has issues with its physical plant, so I'm not objecting. But I think it's a wonderful example of how we need to go yet further on our longer range planning. We made it an extraordinary start. But I think when we get into the discussion later, it's a good example of us as a board needing to have the vision of where our priorities are for limited bonding capacity and other funding.
Thank you, Trustee Riley. Chancellor Malloy, you're on mute. Can't unmute. There must have been an act of a vote of the group. I think if I was going to do my best, Dan Malloy, he would tell you that this is one of his high priorities and that the group has been working on it from the start. And when he arrived, one of the first things he did was tear into the Sightlines report and look at what we needed to do. And that's why this budget has each of the campuses having a contribution to capital improvements. And in the master plan of each of the campuses, there is a look forward into how we're going to do this and what's a priority on each campus. And Dan is sewing with his team, Ryan Lowe and Jim Thielen and others, to pull those together to prioritize them as we look forward. And Dan, give me a thumbs up if I did all right. So the puppet strings behind me from Dan worked somewhat effectively. We'll give Dan a chance to Chancellor Malloy to weigh in a little bit more later. But Trustee Riley, you're spot on. And I know in my time on the trustees, we've moved from kind of the zero growth per square footage to doing that in addition to what are we going to do to invest in, so we don't have another position like the law school where we're suddenly in dire need to make a decision. So having a longer view is helpful. So great point.
Mr. Chair, I want to be I admire the work that's gone on. It's gone on fast. It's terrific. I don't in any way mean to say anything but great kudos to the Chancellor and his team. It's just the next step, and as a board, we need to think ahead.
Absolutely. Continually. Yes, Vice Chancellor Lowe.
Amen to everything you said. The only thing I would add is just a reminder that at the May Board of Trustees meeting, we'll be presenting the 5-year plan. So the 1-year plan is really just a reflection of what's in this budget. This particular project goes back to 2016, 2017, when we were preparing a bond request for a different legislature and a different governor that passed. And now we're 3 years later and spending that money. So this one is a slightly different animal, but your larger point is a great one. And that's the kind of detail that we'll be talking about and providing to the board at the end of the month.
Any questions or comments on the Wadeen Hall presentation? Vice Chairman Gardner, sorry.
Yep, just to build on Tricia's point and Ryan's point, it would be good going forward, and I know we could do it, when we see individual campus upgrades or retrofits of buildings come along, that it ties back to a 5-year plan. So right in that write-up, right there, it says, this is where that building was in a 5-year plan.
Thank
So
you.
that we know, we make that connection right away.
And we'll know we're ticking off one of our, if you're a to-do list person, knowing that it's on our to-do list and that we've checked something off and we've progressed down the list is important on knowing when we're achieving. And I know I've heard that we can be a little bit negative or come across that way. It's just Art, is that we're very appreciative of all the work, as Trustee Riley and Gardner said, of the staff and of each campus. We're just excited to do more because we know what great work you're doing. And so we want to continue to improve and look at how we can better support going forward.
Chair Donnelly?
Yes. Oh, there you are, Chip. Sorry. I didn't see
no
you.
worries. If I might, I definitely share the enthusiasm for next steps and even loftier planning and goals, and second everything that you've said and that Ryan has said. Just want to give a brief shout out and reminder to UMPI and to everybody that really a good thing about this project beyond its particulars is that it is in fact focusing on existing infrastructure that needs care and feeding. And that's long been a priority of the trustees, is to try to really focus and refocus on stewardship and take care of what we have before we make our cost profile even more challenging than it already is. So just want to shout out to Presque Isle for focusing scarce resources on existing infrastructure.
Thank you, Chip. Any other questions? We've figured a way to unmute Chancellor Malloy, and he'd like to correct the record of anything I said.
I'm going to figure out who did this. No, what I would say to everyone is, earlier this week I informed the chair and the vice chair that we were going to dig substantially deeper into the infrastructure issue, and that we will develop the plan, the likes of which you have referred to, Trustee Riley, and it will be a much deeper dive, obviously using information we already have, but also checking out and looking for alternative investment opportunities on a broader basis as well. So it is our intention to throw ourselves into this project. We've been a little busy the last 2 years, but this year will be largely, at least I will develop, I will commit a large portion of my personal resources and time to trying to figure this one out, because I think the old cartoon, we have met the enemy and he is us. We have been the enemy of appropriate investments. And I do want to go back to say something about Ryan's very good work. He's being modest. He's done exceptional work on the budget, as you know, but has been an advocate and has worked closely with me with respect to the advances we're making on infrastructure this very year. They are the largest advancements that we have on that we have made on an institutional basis about changing our own approach. And that doesn't happen easily, but it has come about, and I give Ryan a lot of credit for that.
Thank you, Chancellor Malloy. And in my brief time working with the Chancellor and Vice Chancellor on budgets, I think we're in good hands. So any other questions on Wadeen Hall? I will drop with one last comment and then admonish everybody else not to do it anymore. Is I used to shovel Dr. Wadine's driveway when I was a college student, when Miss Gentile, who is another building on campus, didn't beat us there, which as the time that college students can sleep into and the work ethic of Miss Gentile was not nearly often enough. But Dr. Wadine was in his late 90s, and I asked him how he was one day. And he said, Jim, whenever I could swing my legs off the bed, stand erect, I jump up, click my heels and say, yippee, I got another one. And anyone that knew Dr. Wadine, who was slightly hunched over and on a cane, the visual of him jumping up and clicking his heels would bring a smile to your heart. But I try to remember his comment to remember how we should each start every day with the right attitude, and that we're very fortunate to have another one. So with that, walk down memory lane. I will ask that the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee approve the following resolution to be forwarded to the Board of Trustees approval for May 24th, 2021 board meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Maine at Presque Isle to expend up to $3.757 million from the 2018 bond funds to begin the renovation of Wadine Hall. Can I have that motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Riley. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gardner. And Ellen, would you call the roll?
Certainly. Trustee King,
Yes.
trustee Doak,
Yes.
trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
trustee Irwin,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee McMahon,
Yes.
trustee Martin,
Yes.
trustee Riley,
Yes.
trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you. And next up, we have tab 5, steam and condensate line replacement at USM, and Chief Business Officer Alec Porteous will walk us through that. Good morning, Alec.
Hey, good morning, Chair Donnelly. Good morning, everyone. So we're asking the committee to authorize up to $600,000 to replace our underground steam and condensate line that's between our central heat plant, runs from that to several of our buildings, including Science and Masterton, kind of in the center of our campus. We're proposing to fund this project with existing CapEx funds, E&G unrestricted, so USM funds. By way of background, the University of Southern Maine has a central heat plant that produces steam. That steam travels through an underground distribution system through these steam lines. And we replaced that central heat plant back in 2016, but the distribution lines were not replaced. And the best analogy that's been given to me on this is it's like a heart and arteries. And so we essentially replaced the heart in 2016. There is an artery now that needs to be replaced. The steam line that we're proposing to be replaced is 40 to 50 years old. So it is certainly time for that. Also, an affecting factor here is that construction of the Career and Student Success Center is going to happen very close by this steam line, and disruption to the line during or after work would risk failure of it. If it fails, ultimately we have 6 buildings we're feeding from this steam line. At least 5 of them would lose heat. So we have an opportunity to replace the line over the summer while we start construction of the Career and Student Success Center. And that's what we're proposing to do.
Thank you, Al. Any questions? Or Glenn, did you want to, President Cummings, did you want to weigh in?
No, I think this is just a matter of making sure that we're using that new heat and steam pump processing plant so that it actually maximizes its use.
Thank you, President Cummings. Any questions of the trustees? Seeing none, I will read the text of the resolution that the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee approves the following resolution to be forwarded to the consent agenda for the Board of Trustees approval at the May 24th, 2021 board meeting. The resolution reads that the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee, authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Southern Maine to expend up to $600,000 to replace approximately 575 linear feet of underground steam and condensed lines located at the central heating plant and the Science and Masterton buildings on the Portland campus. Can I have that motion?
So moved.
By Vice Chancellor Gardner, seconded by,
Second.
you picked, Ellen. Ellen, would you call the roll?
Certainly. Trustee King.
Yeah.
Trustee Doak.
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly.
Yes.
Trustee Irwin.
Yes.
Trustee Gardner.
Yes.
Trustee McMahon.
Yes.
Trustee Martin.
Yes.
Trustee Riley.
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you, Ellen. The next item up on tab 6 is Randall Student Center renovation at University of Maine, Augusta. And we have Chief Business Officer Buster Neal presenting. Good morning, Buster.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. If you don't mind, I'll turn it over to our president to begin.
Good morning, everyone.
Joyce, good morning.
I am joined today by Chief Business Officer Buster Neal and Vice President of Management and Marketing, John Henry. But I did want to start with a little bit of an overview. So it was just a little over a year, January 2020, when the Board of Trustees approved a $6.8 million renovation in addition to the Richard J. Randall Student Center, which is on the Augusta campus. The project was to be funded from a combination of the 2017 general obligation bond and UMA reserves. However, at the start of the pandemic, we placed the project on hold given the financial uncertainties that could lie ahead. Since then, we have privatized our textbook operation and Sodexo has taken over our Spirit store. This has allowed us to convert the former bookstore retail space offices and storage rooms for use as a student lounge, as well as offices for student life and student government. Additionally, these changes have in turn freed up much needed space to relieve overcrowding in some of our departmental offices. The new Welcome Center proposal that is before you today, which we will describe in more detail in a moment, is now a $2.1 million project that is renovation only and fits within the available 2017 bond funds that were allocated to UMA, leaving UMA's reserves untouched. As a reminder, according to the Sightlines data, UMA is the highest density factor of any UMS campus, which is also well above our peer average in the Sightlines report. UMA has the strongest net asset value at 68% overall, and the existing Randall Student Center itself has a NAV of 74%. The renovations would have a minor but positive impact on this metric. The proposal in its current form also addresses the Board of Trustees' goal for longer-term fiscal health. Through a creative use and modernization of existing space, we are preserving UMA's reserves for future needs. And now I'd like to turn it over to John Henry to give you a little bit of information about the program.
Thank you, Becky. Good morning, everyone. So there are basically 4 motivations or goals for pursuing this Welcome Center project, even at its reduced scope. The first is to prioritize our commitment to serving students, as the president pointed out, with easy access to all support services centrally located in our key building, leveraging the co-location of key services related to enrollment and the proximity to other services that are ancillary for the student experience. It will provide a bright and airy, high-tech public space and lots of meeting rooms to offer what I call extravagant hospitality, or an extravagant welcome in a modest space for all of those prospective students and groups that might be visiting the university. There's nothing like forming a great first impression, and this modest improvement to Randall Center will in fact do that. Our second goal is to centralize. We are establishing a true one-stop enrollment center for all students, prospective and current, including those we serve online and at a distance, which is most of them. and will consolidate the key student enrollment functions into one concourse, a new concourse of enrollment services right in the core of the building. A third function is to modernize the space. We will update the student-facing offices of admissions, financial aid, advising, veteran services, enrollment information services, and provide a more comfortable and confidential setting for our students to be served. Through these glass partitions that we'll be utilizing in larger spaces, we can reduce the distraction from Zoom-based meetings because many of our counseling sessions are now conducted via Zoom with our students located throughout the state and beyond. And finally, the modernization will also include improved ventilation and air handling in proper sized work areas. And finally, economize. Our fourth goal is to economize the use of the building and the space that we have. And we'll resolve some challenges of departments that were in crowded or dispersed locations when some of them moved into the building years ago from Robinson Hall, which used to be our enrollment services center. So these contiguous spaces will solve the problem of communication among and between the staff and the necessary cross-training that we need to be doing. We also are being smart in building in hotel spaces for staff, presuming that many staff will continue to work remotely or flip between being on campus and working from home. So a better utilization of the square footage footprint that we already have. We will be shifting some non-student facing functions out of the building, like IT, a very important function, but does not need to be in the student facing central building of Randall Student Center. And as the president pointed out, by reusing the former bookstore to fulfill the promise of student space, it has allowed us to provide additional square footage on the second floor for other functions like financial aid. We are also returning 3 current offices occupied by financial aid back to the faculty to provide proper faculty spaces, which we need for a growing program in areas like our larger nursing program. I think I'll turn it over now to talk about the process and the planning for the contractors and bids to Buster.
Thank you, John, Mr. Chairman. In terms of process, we'll be utilizing the offices of strategic procurement and capital planning for a formal bid. As soon as you give us the go-ahead, we will get the bid documents out on the street. It's our plan to have those bids open on May 25th, the day after the full board meeting. And we anticipate that the contractor will begin work on June 1st. Currently, we think the duration of the project will be 12 weeks. At the same time, however, we do have contingency plans in place to get us through the entire fall semester if necessary. Logistically, there will be both permanent and temporary office relocations. In fact, some of these relocations that are permanent are already underway, and we will be planning for the temporary moves that will occur during the construction project. In terms of finances, as President White mentioned, it's about a $2.1 million budget. All of the direct costs involved with this project would come from revenue bond, general obligation revenue bonds that are already in place. Upon completion of the project, we will have no additional operating expense that we will incur, and there will be no additional parking required from this project. So President White, I'll give that back to you.
Certainly. So I just close by saying I think we brought forward a creative and a responsible alternative and respectfully request your support.
Thank you, President White, and I'm sorry for not starting the agenda item with you. I needed to adjust my annotated schedule, so I apologize for that. Any questions of the trustees? Seeing none, I will read the text of the resolution that the Finance, Facilities and Technology Committee approve the following resolution to be forwarded to the Board of Trustees for approval on May 24th, 2021 board meeting. The board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the Finance, Facilities and Technology Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Maine at Augusta to expend up to $2.15 million in funds from the 2018 general obligation bond to renovate the Richard J. Randall Student Center. This project replaces the Randall Student Center renovation and additional project authorized in January of 2020. Can we have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by trustee Riley, second.
Second.
Second by trustee Rotundo. Ellen, would you call the roll?
Certainly. Trustee Kane,
Yes.
trustee Doak,
Yes.
trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
trustee Irwin,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee McMahon,
Yes.
trustee Martin,
Yes.
trustee Riley,
Yes.
trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you, Ellen. Next up, we have tab 7, replacement for the former Clarence C. Little Hall, which the proposal is to rename Beryl Warner Williams Hall. And it's also been, will be a request as part of this, it's on the agenda as a consent item. There'll be a request to remove it as a consent item to allow us to have a little bit of a discussion at the board meeting. And presenting this will be President Joan Farini Mundy. And good morning, President Farini Mundy.
Good morning, Chair Donnelly. Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be able to bring this recommendation to you today, following many months of deliberation, of public input, and of doing background and due diligence work on the several names that were recommended for this building. I want to thank the campus committees that gathered information and that did such thoughtful work all through our process here. But what we bring you today is the recommendation to name the building that has been formerly called Clarence C. Little Hall, to name it as the Beryl Warner Williams Hall. Let me tell you just a little bit about Beryl Warner Williams. She was born in Bangor, is a graduate of Bangor High School, attended the University of Maine, and in 1935 received her Bachelor of Science in Mathematics, was the first African-American graduate to earn a mathematics degree from the University of Maine. She was not able to teach in Maine, but went on to do a number of very important things in her career, including teaching at several universities, Morgan State University, a notable historically Black college and university among them, where she was for 33 years. She was a dean. She was a founder of serious new innovations there in continuing education, and had a distinguished career along the way. She received an honorary doctorate from UMaine in 1972 and the University of Maine Alumni Association Career Award in 1995. There's much more to say about Dr. Williams. She is buried in Bangor, a very distinguished person, and was one of the recommendations that came through from our naming committee. So I present this to you, and am eager for your conversation.
Thank you, President Farini Mundy. And I'll just start off by saying what a fabulous person to recognize and honor on our campus, and recall some of the great things that have occurred in our campus and our history. And thinking through when she was going through education and all of the different components of her career, what a truly remarkable woman she was. And what a trendsetter, not trendsetter, but just cutting through so many barriers to move forward, truly inspirational. So just want to compliment the process and all of those involved for coming up with such a worthy person. And I'll open it up to comments or questions from the trustees for President Farini Mundy. All right, hearing none, I will move to read the text of the resolution that the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee approve the following resolution to be forwarded to the consent agenda for the Board of Trustees. Take the consent agenda off of that motion to the agenda for the Board of Trustees approval at the May 24th, 2021 board meeting. That the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system, acting through the University of Maine, to rename the former Clarence C. Little Hall as the Beryl Warner Williams Hall. Can I have that motion? Moved by Chair Irwin, seconded by Trustee Kane. And Ellen, would you call the roll?
Certainly. Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Doak,
Yes.
trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
trustee Irwin,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee McMahon,
Yes.
trustee Martin,
Yes.
trustee Riley,
Yes.
trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Thank you, Ellen. Next up is tab 8, repaving Main Street Initiative. I just love that title. And will be presented by Chief Information Officer David Demers.
Great. Good morning, Chair Donnelly, and thank you very much. I think I can carve or shave a minute or two off this presentation, so let's see if I can hold true to that. It's with great honor and excitement and enthusiasm that I bring to you the Repaving Main Street Initiative. The repaving metaphor is appropriate, as you will see. We're not talking about building a new road. We're talking about taking the infrastructure that we have, grinding it up, if you will, and realigning it so that it supports our unified accreditation initiatives. So as we move into the presentation, you might recall it was 3 years ago this month when we brought to the Board of Trustees an overview of where we were with our Main Street environment. As a recap for the new trustees, our Main Street system is our enterprise resource planning platform. We currently run PeopleSoft, and we run 3 separate modules of PeopleSoft. Campus Solutions is our student information system. We have our HR system, which is human capital management, and then our budgeting and finances are running through the financials module. For historical context, we ran or implemented PeopleSoft about 16 years ago, and this was born out of a need to migrate off of legacy student information system named ISIS at that time. Many of the decisions made when we moved from the mainframe architecture to PeopleSoft were driven by some desires and needs of the campuses to maintain separate configurations and separate control for each of the campuses. That included separating the data so that it, in essence, existed in silos. That architecture resulted in several compromises, particularly in light of where we are today and with our goal to achieve unified accreditation. Again, if you recall 3 years ago, I talked about the fact that even though all of our student information sits in a single database, each campus might code that student differently, even if they're enrolled in similar degree programs, so that it becomes very difficult to match students across campuses. That makes it very difficult to have student record portability, to allow students to transfer credits from campus to campus, to promote our course cross-listing and collaborative degree programming initiatives. And it also really puts a wrinkle in our ability to access and analyze the data across the campuses. So at that time, 3 years ago, we talked about the need to move to a future state scenario where we had more uniformity in how we code our students in the student information system to allow that native credit option so that students taking a course on one campus can have that credit count toward their degree on another campus if that's what the student wanted to do. It also allows us to be much more efficient in expanding access to educational opportunities across the university and gives us the opportunity to create more operational efficiency across the board. So that's our future state. That's where we would like to go. And that's what we're aiming and proposing to do by repaving our Main Street infrastructure. So it's easy to say that, but difficult to pull off. So at the time, 3 years ago, we talked about a 4-part plan. And the third part of that plan was recently wrapped up. And that's where we suggested we would go out to identify a consultant who would come in to help us take a deep dive in the ERP environment and identify those key opportunities to create a roadmap to achieve the goal of having a unified accreditation supporting ERP platform. And that's exactly what we did. So last June, we wrapped up our RFP. We identified Huron as our consultation partner, and they've been engaging with our functional offices across different areas, functional areas since July. And just last month, they were able to provide and deliver a roadmap of opportunities that would allow us to, in essence, recreate our Main Street environment. Just some of the work that Huron did, they actually did a deep dive of our current state by engaging with functional offices with a series of questionnaires and workshops. They took the feedback from those workshops and questionnaires and really started to look at our opportunities for key level improvements and started to rank those in terms of the high priority solutions that we should be aiming for. They distilled everything down into a roadmap, a comprehensive plan that would allow us to get to unified accreditation as quickly as possible. And right now we are socializing that report and bringing the proposal to the Board of Trustees. Just to give you a sense of the scope of the work that Huron did, they actually had over 700 different questionnaires issued. We had about a 45% response rate across the university, but more importantly, we collected over 22,000 individual data points, which helped inform where we needed to target our energies and make sure that we were making the right choices for the future state environment. In addition to that, Huron conducted over 30 workshops with HR, finance, student information system, our technology team, our reporting teams, including institutional research, all of these functional areas, over 50 hours of workshops conducted, over 250 people participated in it. And at the end of the day, we had this laundry list of about 300 unique opportunities that we need to now prioritize to build that roadmap. So the way this all plays out is we took all that information, those 300 opportunities, we've been ranking them in terms of those that would have the hugest or the biggest impact to help us to move toward a future state as I described. These have been broken down into 30 distinct projects. 8 of them are really aligned with achieving unified accreditation and supporting unified accreditation strategic goals. And the other 20 are around achieving operational efficiency in our functional offices. We are heavily dependent on paper and manual processes, manual dual data entry across the system. So we really want to take advantage of the tools available to make sure that we are allowing people to do their jobs, which is to serve our students. In terms of the key outcomes that we would expect by going through this effort, is in the student information system realm. We know that we have some work that is going to be required from the Department of Education in our financial aid realm. We are currently working on that as we speak, but that'll be woven into the overall plan that we're talking about here. More importantly, we would modernize our student self-service capabilities. So the Main Street interface is a key barrier that students have reported they struggle with. We know it's not very friendly. We know it doesn't work well on a mobile device, and we are in the process of rolling out improvements in that regard. You probably have heard about the Chancellor's driven initiative to have a unified course catalog, meaning that we would have consistent course coding across the system that would allow students to identify educational opportunities at any campus that would align with their degree and their degree plan. We would also take the opportunity to optimize and eliminate manual processes to create just much more efficiency in our functional offices, as well as to take the opportunity to have better, tighter integration with other third-party tools. Looking over on the finance and budget side, right now, we do this admirably, I have to admit, but our budget planning process is a little more manual than I think anyone would like to admit. We use Google Sheets heavily for this. It works, but there are better ways to do it. So we would hope to be able to leverage a cloud software as a service solution to create some opportunities for automation in building our budget plans and migrating those over into a new streamlined chart of accounts, modernizing our cash management processes, integrating our grants management solutions, and again, integrating our existing third-party tools for travel, procure to pay, and asset and inventory management. The other bucket is the human resources side. And if anyone has gone through a search process with the University of Maine system, you know it's a bit cumbersome. We do, again, rely heavily on paper. So by moving to a cloud or a software as a service-based solution in the human resource space, we would be able to standardize and optimize our recruiting and onboarding processes and really ramping up our self-service capabilities, including benefits selection and different personnel actions. We would also be able to fully integrate with payroll and having that combined over on the finance side and have less manual move of dollars between the two systems and have everything play nicely together would be a key outcome here. And we would also be able to beef up our performance management process, which again is heavily paper-based as it exists today. Other benefits with the plan would be really supporting our data governance initiatives, having a more robust data management strategy, taking advantage of our existing data marts that we have built over the past few years to combine them into a comprehensive data warehouse that would support enterprise-wide reporting and analytics across the board. We would also, on the technology side, be able to reduce a lot of technical debt, retiring redundant and unused applications and combining them into the new Main Street vision. We would also have the ability to improve our identity and access management. And if you sit on the audit committees, you know that that has been a finding that we've been responding to for the past couple of years, is having tighter control over our identity and access management policies, including enhanced security and launching multi-factor authentication for key systems. So these are the big picture goals that came out of the recommendations from the Huron report. And I want to talk a little bit about how we get there and what we're talking about in terms of a timeline. I mentioned briefly that the key recommendation in the report is to move our HR and our finance solutions into the cloud. So with the primary goal of taking advantage of the Oracle Cloud solutions that are available today. What that does is it compresses our time to implementation and actually forces us to take a more configuration-based approach and wean ourselves off of the heavy customization that we have in both platforms. For both of these, we would go through a specification and design phase that would last a little less than a year. We would launch directly into a configuration stage with an intent to launch these particular modules within a 2-year time frame. So again, that would be concurrent. We would do this concurrently for the HR and the finance areas. And then the information that we would glean from those implementations would guide how we improve our student information system. The student information system is going to be a little more comprehensive, a little more heavy. It's a heavier lift. That's just the nature of our business is really rooted in how we use the student information system. But we have several projects that are currently underway, including that financial aid overhaul, looking at revising the overall academic operating model, standardizing course coding conventions. That's all stuff that needs to occur outside of the technology, but it informs and is used by our implementation plan. We would also optimize and deploy unused functionality within the campus solutions environment and be able to start to roll out more automation capabilities within the platform. Our target would be to have this full transformation completed within a 5-year time frame, but we would start to receive some of the benefits in the bigger picture slide that I showed you as we roll out across the 5 years. In terms of the cost, and that's what we are bringing to you today, is a proposal that helps us to figure out how to pay for this. When I showed Vice Chancellor Lowe the sum in the lower right-hand corner, I had to fan him off a little bit and pick him up off the floor because it's a heavy price tag. It's $17 million. But when we start to break it down in terms of the yearly expenditures, it became a little bit more digestible, I guess I'll say. So what we are proposing is that we carve out the money to support year 1 and year 2 to get us started to the tune of about $7.8 million. And it's broken out in the different project tasks that I have laid out here. What that would do is it will help us to build a bridge to actually figure out how to fund the remaining out years of this project by using a variety of external resources, including federal grant opportunities and foundation funds that might be available. In addition, we may be banking along with Ryan on continued continued investment income to help drive and fund some of this initiative. Overall, what we are asking for today is a commitment to spend $7.8 million to cover the first 2 years of this project. That money will come from temporary investment income, revenue bond interest, unused capital project contingency, and various operational savings that are coming mostly out of my budget. In terms of the timeline, we have been working to get that Huron report in front of as many audiences as possible. We wanted to bring this to the board in the May timeframe to get the approval so we can get to work on this starting in June. We need the budget approved for moving forward with this. And in the interim, we will continue to roll out the timeline and work with functional offices on prioritizing the list and how we will tackle moving forward with the initiative, and also developing a strategy for funding the out years of the overall project. But I would be happy to entertain any questions at this point. I went through that as quickly as I could. I think I carved out a couple minutes, but this is a huge initiative. And if I'm still standing at the end, I look forward to the day when I can bring back to you the success we've had with this initiative.
Thank you, David, and thank you for always being the one we can count on for saving us a couple of minutes without cutting too much content, so we get the right decision and the right time. Appreciate it very much. Any questions of the trustees? Trustee McMahon.
David, on one of your slides, you talked about 8 projects on unification for unified accreditation and 20 optimization projects to gain efficiencies. Can you quantify those efficiencies in dollar terms on an annual basis?
That's a real tough one for me to be able to do and have confidence in what I would say, because as I alluded to throughout the presentation, we are heavily based on paper right now. So taking advantage of the integrated workflows and the approval processes that are available in the PeopleSoft environment would free people's time to work on the jobs that they have been hired to do. Now, we know that everyone and every functional office would say they're understaffed and they are overburdened. So it's not like we would be able to assign new, I'm saying this, I don't think we'd be able to assign new work to these offices. It would be able to allow them to be much more efficient in getting the work that has been assigned to them done in a timely fashion. This will help improve things like turnaround on application decisions, all the way through advising processes and getting approval for course registration. So I can take a stab at trying to quantify the number of hours that might be saved in each functional area, but I would need to engage with those functional offices to have a better understanding there.
Thank you, David. Any other questions? Chair Irwin.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to Trustee McMahon's question. As you do that, I mean, if we're saving hours over time, we're at some point able to say we're saving FTEs. And so I know you can't tell us what that is now, but as this project unfolds and it becomes clearer and clearer, I think I certainly would be interested in seeing what that bottom line impact is going to be. But I would say more important than that is on the student side is being able to measure the benefits to students. I know we've talked about this before. This has been a long time coming to get to this stage, and I can't thank you enough for the work you've done to get us to this point, all the foundational work that has gone on to get here. But the real yield now is going to be how do we make it easier for students to access data and act on data. So also going forward, I think it would be really helpful if we could start to identify, we've saved X number of minutes a student accessing a course information, enrolling in a course, changing a course, all the different little pieces that they have to go through and all the frustrations they have with this chopped up system. It would be really good to be able to say, we're now saving we can do these things faster, and here's how much.
Trustee Irwin, I might be able to help with that. This weekend, my son made an appointment with me to come show me how much he dislikes Main Street and wants me to see if I can navigate it. And I told him that David Demers had a plan to repave Main Street and what was coming, and he said the students would have a parade down Main Street carrying David on their shoulders if he improves it. So I don't know if it does anything for their time, but I think their enjoyment of how they get from point A to point B should improve. So I'll report back on just how miserably I do in the system one-on-one. And Vice Chairman Gardner.
Oh, thank you, Chair. David, it's a great project and I don't question the need of it. I'm looking at the funding though. You've got the first tranche of funding around $7 million, I believe. And that will take you a couple of years through the first couple of years of a 5-year project. How confident and what discussions have you had with Ryan and with others on where you might find the other $10 million? Because you're really asking us to approve a project that's only partially funded and no real comment on how we'll fund the rest of it when we get there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Gardner. I will invite Ryan to respond as well, but he and I have had conversations along with Miriam White about funding strategies and pockets of money that might be available over the next couple of years, including some unused dollars that might be available in our demolition fund. But we know that we have been benefited with investment income over the past couple of years. So again, maybe a bit of a gamble, but we know that we want to carve out at least an allocation from potential investment income to pay for some of this. I am confident that this would be a very attractive funding opportunity for programs like Title III and maybe even FIPSI if they are ever funded again at the federal level. So my intent is to seek a huge portion of the out-year funding from federal grants to really highlight the innovation that we are doing by combining our systems to serve multiple universities with an efficient platform. Again, I don't have a good answer to say this is exactly what we are going to do, but these are the strategies that we are going to pursue.
I'm sorry, Ryan, just another question that builds on that. If we spend the $7 million in the 2 years worth of work, I guess it can be done in multiple ways, but I think the answer will be that you'll say is, we really don't want to do that without the commitment to go all the way, because I don't think you can stop, or it'd be very difficult, I'm guessing, to stop there, take 2 or 3 years off because we didn't have funding. So it's really critical that we figure out the funding next year, I guess, for the rest of it.
Agreed.
Thinking about it the right way?
I have a question.
Trustee King.
Just a clarification. I heard all of the questions and the conversation. The question is, reduction of FTEs is not a stated goal of this initiative, correct? It may be something that may or may not come to fruition, but this is actually an initiative that's about making things more user-friendly, making them faster, making them less burdensome, so people, as you said, so people can do other things, like them do their jobs. Is that, I mean, I'm a regular user of Main Street as a graduate student, and so I appreciate the comments about how it is not always easy, but if it's just faster and more efficient, that would make me happy enough. I guess I just wanted to clarify that reduction of FTEs, while that may or may not happen, is not a stated goal or cause for this initiative.
You are correct. It is not a stated goal or outcome. However, we realize that it might create opportunities for us to consider reducing our FTE if we are able to achieve the level of operational efficiency that we know we will be able to gain by moving in this direction. As I said, if you engage with any functional office, they will tell you that they are already oversubscribed and they spend way too much time managing and babysitting the technology. So if we are able to eliminate those barriers, I think we can have a more engaged conversation with them on what is the appropriate size for that office given this current state, and we're leveraging automation to its full potential.
Trustee Gardner.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back and follow up. The reason I made the point, David, and it's really for the board to think about, and I'm for this, but I think we should recognize that if we approve this project with $7 million of the funding, needing another $10 million to be found, and it probably can be found. But if it could not be found, we will be in a position where, some other criteria or some other project in the system might need $5 or $6 million. With this project halfway done, we'd be in a place where we'd more likely say, we can't stop Main Street. We're going to need to take that $5 or $6 million and put it against Main Street. In some ways, we're setting a multi-year priority here, which is appropriate, without all the funding understood. And I just think we need to be aware that if we get to a place where we have a bad year or another pandemic or something unusual happens, we have this project out of the gate, headed to an end state, and we'll need to find $10 more million. And it may come from some other filling the gap or some other crises that might be happening somewhere in the system, or that will be the choice we'll be facing.
Yeah, if it helps, Vice Chair Gardner, I want to point out that the funding that we're talking about committing for the first 2 years is really aimed at getting us to implement the HR and the finance solutions in the cloud. We will gain those functionalities, those improvements, that underlying infrastructure that will help us to achieve the goals for the student information system, which is going to take a little bit longer. That stated, we are already working on the interface to make it much more user-friendly, mobile accessible, the Main Street environment for the students and the advisors. That functionality is going to be rolling out this year. If we can get traction on the Unified Catalog Initiative and have more consistent coding of our courses and programs aligned in Main Street, that'll automatically trickle over to gain efficiencies for students as they are looking at registering for courses and considering their educational opportunities. The out years are really about bringing it all together in a much more comprehensive, cohesive package. But if we were not able to do any funding for years 3 through 5, I'm confident that we will still have a much better environment available to support all of our students across the board after this 2-year initiative. So I know that's not a good answer, but I want to make it clear that it's not like we would be wasting investment and time by not having the out years funded.
Actually is a pretty good answer. I saw Trustee Rotundo had her hand up.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to speak to the same issue. I certainly recognize the importance of this, but it goes back to, in my mind, what Trustee Riley was talking about earlier in terms of priorities, and just thinking in terms of what perhaps we won't be able to get done in the out years if, in fact, we say that we're going to go forward with this now, and just to be mindful of the fact that we are setting priorities, and there are things that we probably will not be able to do going forward by saying yes to this.
Thank you, Trustee Rotundo. Any other trustees? Trustee Riley.
Thank you. Dave, are there any unanticipated contingent liabilities? The image of repaving is a lovely one, but whenever you repave, you have to detour. So as we make this transition, are there any potentials for sort of underlying challenges as we try to integrate the old and new?
Yeah, it's all going to come down to resources available to help configure these new systems and get them up and running in parallel with keeping the existing system up and running. Yeah. So that puts a tremendous burden on the functional offices. So this budget is really heavy on outside consulting resources to either backfill functional office processing or to help us focus on building the new environment and configuring the new environment without derailing those and distracting those individuals in those offices from doing their daily job. So it's a real balancing act that we're going to have to negotiate with the offices where those investments and resources would be best positioned so that they can keep their daily functions going while we're building out this new environment. I think that's the biggest concern and plan for contingency that I have in the back of my mind as we approach this project.
Thank you. Any other trustees? Questions or comments? Hearing, seeing none, I will read the text of the resolution that the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee waive the consent 3-step process for projects of $5 million or more and approve the following resolution to be forwarded to the Board of Trustees at the May 24th, 2021 board meeting. that the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system to expend up to $7.8 million to support the first 2 years of the 5-year Repaving Main Street ERP replenishment initiative, with the remaining funding to be derived from a variety of sources, including external funding agencies. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Chair Irwin, seconded by
Second.
Trustee Martin. And Ellen, would you call the roll?
Certainly. Trustee Kane,
Yes.
trustee Doak,
Yes.
trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
trustee Irwin,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee McMahon,
Yes.
trustee Martin,
Yes.
trustee Riley,
Yes.
trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you. Next up, we have tab 13. The ASCC Building Addition, UMaine, the Green Engineering and Materials GEM Factory of the Future. And presenting will be President Farini Mundy. And President Farini Mundy, let's see if you can do it super fast speed.
I can if we don't let Habib speak, but I think he needs to get at least 1 minute. So we'll go to him quickly, but thank you, Chair Donnelly. We bring to you a request to expend up to $1.5 million to proceed with the design of the Green Engineering and Materials Factory of the Future, about which you have heard in a previous meeting. A really exciting project for us that encompasses not only important research and technology development that Habib will tell you about, but a major education and workforce development initiative as well. Because if we are able to have this facility on our campus, then we will be able to engage students at all levels and over time, of course, from across the system through unified accreditation in frontier engineering work across a variety of domains. I'll let Habib tell you the details, but we do have some prospects for external funding that we are engaging with currently. And so this is a very fast track project, but Habib, just a couple minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, President Farini Mundy. Having been a faculty for 35 years, I'm trained to speak in 50-minute increments, President Farini Mundy. First, just to remind you of the Factory of the Future. The Factory of the Future builds on our success in additive manufacturing. If you recall, we printed a 3D printed boat, we printed a shelter, and what we'd like to do is take this to the next level and build a factory of the future that's called Industry 4.0, which brings us to digital manufacturing. Scale this up so you can print a variety of things, including think about printing housing. Printing full-size boats and rolling them out the coast of Maine. One opportunity, for example, right now we're working with the Maine State Housing Authority. There's a big major need for low-income housing in the state of Maine right now, and there's a need for 20,000 low-income homes as we speak, and they currently cost about $200,000 each. So that's a $4 billion market for low-income homes only in the state of Maine. But think about a 600 square foot unit costing $200,000 today, and plus, if you can find somebody to build it today, and you see the cost of a piece of plywood just last week went up from $30 to $60 per sheet. And plus we don't have the labor in Maine to do it. So partnering with them, we would like to figure out if we could 3D print homes using wood-based materials, for example. This is the kind of research the Factory of the Future will allow us to do. Imagine a day where we would have factories like this near our population centers, where you can email drawings of a house and it can arrive within weeks. Or less. Imagine a day where we have factories like this on the coast of Maine that would roll out 200-foot vessels out of the coast of Maine. That's really where we're heading with this technology. We are leading the country in large-scale additive manufacturing. We'd like to keep it that way, and that's why we envision the Factory of the Future. The Factory of the Future allows us to go ahead and build things a lot bigger than we can today. Up to 250-foot long structures can be built within this facility, up to 80 feet wide. And rather than buying a printer and putting it into a building, actually we're designing a building to be the printer. So that's the exciting part. And what we're going to be able to do, we've put together a very exciting GEM education initiative that the president looked at. And that initiative allows us to strengthen significantly the UMS Transforms initiative, bringing engineering, computing, information science together and train students in that space across UMS. Now, why we're here with you today is we have a real opportunity to get a big chunk of this funding from the federal government. So the DoD has met with us, met with our chancellor, met with the president, and confirmed to them that they would like to work with us to build this factory. And they can potentially put together a big chunk of the funds for it. And those chunks could arrive in September of next year, September of 22. And again, it's so what we'd like to do is go ahead and get started with the design of the facility now, so we don't lose a whole year. So we've worked with facilities to figure out what it would cost to get the design to the next level. So we'd like to invest in 10 months of design, essentially, for the facility, starting as soon as possible by investing $1.5 million. So the request today is for you to approve us to go ahead and start the design of this facility and work for the next 10 months. And once we're done and got a good handle of the cost of this facility, we'll come back to you and give you a report. Where is the federal funds? Where are the federal funds? And here's what we think it would cost to get there. President Furiamundi, the floor is back yours. Back to yours.
That was terrific, Habib. Thank you. Questions or comments?
Any questions of the trustees?
I would just say it's very exciting.
Thank you, Emily.
I agree, and looking at what you've got behind the scenes, potentially coming down the road for funding for it is very exciting as well. The project itself is exciting, but the potential lack of burden that it presents to the finances is also an additional moment for excitement. Trustee Gardner.
I was just going to say, I've had meetings with Habib and gone over them 2 or 3 times, and each time it gets more exciting. I clearly see it as the future for a lot of different types of manufacturing, and a chance for the University of Maine to continue to be leading, not only here and nationally, but leading on a global basis. So I think it's a very good project.
I'll be impressed with the machine when we can clone Habib. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll read the text of the resolution that the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee approve the following resolution to be forwarded for the Board of Trustees approval at the May 24th, 2021 board meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Maine to expend up to $1.5 million to proceed with the design of a green engineering and materials factory of the future, with all of the final terms and conditions subject to review and approval of the University of Maine system treasurer and general counsel. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Gardner, seconded by,
Second.
I'll let Ellen make that determination. And Ellen, would you call the roll?
Certainly. Trustee King,
Yes.
Trustee Doe,
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you. We are about 14 minutes behind and just a few items left on the agenda. So if we could be mindful of that as we're going through these last informational items. And tab 9, review of projects with a value of $250,000 or greater. Dave Demers.
Great, thank you again, Chair Donnelly. And this is an informational item, so I will go quickly. I'm going to hit only on the high points, pun intended, which you will see why in just a second. So the Classrooms for the Future project, we remain on track to get things wrapped up this summer. A couple of things to note, at UMA, we are working to get a couple of additional web conferencing rooms updated using remaining contingency funds from the prior Rust grant. You might recall I shared that we got a new $1 million Rust grant recently, and that work will be planned out over the summer. So everything is on track to wrap this up again this summer. terms of the web conferencing investments that you approved to allow us to have more high flex opportunities across the system, we are well on track. You can see where we are in the completion portion of this. I did want to note a couple of areas, particularly at UMaine and at USM. They have a couple of rooms on hold as they are considering potentially moving allocated equipment to other facilities, either for facility renovation or to support other strategic needs. So we're working with those campuses to finalize those, but again, we expect that this will be wrapped up this summer as well. On the Main Street improvement side, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about this because this is an important milestone and one that I was alluding to in the prior presentation. You might recall that I brought to this group the fact that we are rolling out a new interface for the Main Street environment for students to use, one that's more mobile friendly, more accessible, and just as much prettier to look at. This environment is sold by a company called High Point, and they call it their High Point Campus Experience. We recently wrapped up a pilot at the University of Maine in Machias. The feedback that we got from students was overwhelmingly positive, and we know that this is going to provide some market improvement in terms of course scheduling, looking at and reviewing bills, bill payment, being able to get your financial aid letters approved all through this interface. So what we are doing is we're going to roll out a soft launch this summer, making it an available option for any student to opt into over the summer, with the intent that we will look at feedback from that experience and actually inform how we do a full launch for the fall. As Chair Donnelly, you asked the question, or you had talked about your son complaining about the current Main Street environment. This is the type of test that will help inform and drive our ability to roll out functions and features, because we can identify where they're struggling with and where they want to flip back and forth between the classic environment and the High Point environment, and take a look at those metrics so that we know that we're rolling out the right features and functions at the right point in time. But this is very exciting that we're at this point where we can flip this and make it available to all students this coming summer, and then with the intent that it will be rolled out in full for the fall. And this will also be the primary interface through which students will access the Universal Course Catalog when that work wraps up. On the VoIP implementation, you might recall we have 3 campuses that we still are cutting over to take advantage of electronic telephony. So in terms of UMF, basically we're wrapping work up there. We're just doing the cleanup and e-waste disposal, and we are rolling out upgrades in the Fusion Center and Mantor over the summer. So that'll be closed out on that time frame. At UMPI, we are looking at the academic and administrative buildings to complete. Work is underway in the residence halls. We expect that we'll wrap this project up around the end of June as we work toward turning off their legacy system this month. And at USM, it's just because there are so many buildings to knock out, we will continue to go down the path that we're going there, building by building, and hopefully get this wrapped up in by the time we hit the fall, but probably not. The wrinkle with the law school is probably going to help us on this way, in that we don't have to worry about the infrastructure improvements in the law school building if they're going to be relocating, but we'll work with Dean Softly on the project plan for that. On the Brightspace implementation, I did tell you that we were going to bring this back. This project is now closed. Key thing I want to point out is we wrapped it up on schedule. We were under budget, and most importantly, we maintained the scope of the project. We did not try to do too much with this rollout. So we're fully using Brightspace at this point, and we're working with the offices that want to take greater advantage of this, including non-credit course programming, so that that can be something we can manage through the existing Brightspace environment, but that was not part of this implementation. So we maintain the scope, and again, on schedule, under budget, so all good there. On the ERP assessment, you just heard me give you a deep dive on where we are with that project. So the final steps of that are really getting the approval for the funding strategy in hand. So we'll look forward to the May meeting a little later this month for the full board to get that funding committed, and then we'll get to work to start chipping away at repaving our Main Street. And the last project to give you an update on is our Northern Ring optical equipment refresh, which is on track, will be completed this summer. This is going to provide market improvements in terms of bandwidth and access for our northern environments. All the site surveys have been completed. The equipment's been installed. We're just doing final burn-in testing, and we will start to rip out the old switches and equipment, and once the migration is complete, and then we'll consider this project wrapped up as well. So that is a very quick roundup of all the projects that we have going on. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions of the trustees? Thank you. Seeing none, we'll move to tab 10, a parking update for USM. And I have on my sheet that Chief Business Officer Alec Portress will be making that presentation. Glenn, did you want to introduce it?
Yeah, thank
President
you.
Cummings? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we will move briskly, especially given the amount of time we have. We're pleased to provide this update on parking for the Portland campus. It is required by the city of Portland, and it is consistent, of course, with the BOT approved comprehensive or master plan. This need obviously correlates with the new demands for parking created by the emerging Residence Hall, Portland Commons, as well as the pending other buildings that might be renovated or built on the Portland campus, such as the Graduate Center, as is outlined in our master plan. Our process with the help of our chosen consultants, Desmond Associates, has been extremely thorough. We have at least 7 sites on campus were reviewed carefully. The plan that you will look at today selects a site that has been vetted both by the neighbors and by our building committee, as well as by initial conversations with the city of Portland, pending the city's final approval. At this point, I'll turn it directly over to CBO Alec Portress, and he will talk about the details of location, funding, and any other questions that you might have.
Thanks very much, President Cummings, and Chair Donnelly. Given the time considerations, we'll move through this and just hit the highest points. It's an informational item. We're still well within the board authorization from more than a year ago, but given the significance of the project, we just wanted to make sure we were given an update at this point. So last August, we selected our consultant that the president mentioned, Desmond Design Management out of Boston. They've been advising our structured parking building committee made up of USM and University of Maine system team members. Desmond started with a site analysis going around our campus and looking at the best and highest use of space for parking garage. That was what they pitched us on, and it was very attractive to us to essentially have that starting point with experts. They ultimately recommended the Wishcamper site and expanding our existing garage. They cited several points there that were attractive to them. For one thing, it doesn't displace existing uses, and it maintains key campus areas for future development. It also has a limited neighborhood impact, but still has proximity to the new Portland Commons Residence Hall. And then there's a limited impact from massing and light trespass. So those are the reasons behind their recommendation for Wishcamper. This is just a graphic that shows the 4 sites they looked at. So Law Building, one of them, Law Area rather, Falmouth Street, where we had originally looked. This is an existing parking lot. Sullivan Gym, obviously would need to come down if we were to put parking there. And then the Wishcamper site, and they looked at a couple of different configurations there. Within that Wishcamper site, they basically provided 3 options. The first, which we call W1, was a standalone item, standalone garage. Second, W2 was connected, and so was W3 to our existing garage. There are more cost-saving synergies by connecting to the existing garage. W2 was the smaller version of that, so that's what we've selected at this point. W2 would include 660 spaces. 453 of those would be considered net new by the city of Portland. We would be displacing what would have been 207 spaces, rather in the Wishcamper lot that would have been created when we revised that lot. The president talked about our interactions with the city. During our permitting process for the current development project, the Residence Hall, Career and Student Success Center, and the Quad, parking featured heavily. The planning board approved our project with a condition of approval to create 396 new spaces. We either need to do that per that COA on campus in the form of structured parking or off campus in satellite parking. The 453 net new is based on just design integrity of the current design that Desmond provided, but I think there's some room to work within that. That's just where they are within the schematics at this point. Their cost estimate for this project is 20 to 24.5 million. That includes a 20% soft cost allocation. So that's the full project cost estimate. That's just based on a conceptual design, not on schematics. Our sense as a committee is that within schematic design and hiring of a construction manager, there's going to be an opportunity to drive some budget efficiencies there and probably bring that organic cost down. I do want to caution committee members, though, given what we're seeing just in the region and across the state in terms of construction costs, well, we're organically driving those costs down. And I think we may be picking up just inflationary costs that we're seeing right now around materials, around cost of labor. And that's nothing unique to USM or the region or the state for that matter. It's just what's going on in the construction industry. So I put that out there as how we're thinking about the budget right now. Key budget factors, we had contemplated and in fact proposed revising the Wishcamper parking lot. We would no longer do that if we went ahead with the garage in this location. When we were thinking about that, that was a standalone project. So we would be adding what we had thought of as our budget before on a parking garage, which was $12.7 million, to that $1.7 million cost for the Wishcamper project that we had contemplated. That would be a total of 14.4. We would be displacing more spaces in Wishcamper than when we had thought about the Falmouth Street space, 207 rather than 61. So you're going to pick up some costs there, and then construction costs rather than the 28,000 we were estimating, which at the time I think was a pretty conservative number. It looks like we're in the 30 to 36, even $37,000 per space to build structured parking at this point. Desmond is also recommending precast concrete rather than a steel structure. Generally, precast is more expensive. However, given the steel market right now, that may not be the case. On the other hand, precast is a lot better for Northeast conditions. Desmond is very strong on that. I think we'd save money in terms of maintenance over time, and I'll get to that momentarily. So just in terms of how a project like this would be funded, how we would finance it and so forth, obviously with the appropriate board authorization. But our thinking right now is based on our experience with the current development project, it costs us about $46,000 annually to service $1 million in debt. We're talking about issuing university system revenue bonds. That means at a budget of $20 million, you'd be looking at annual debt service about $920,000. Desmond's recommending repair and replacement of $75,000. So we're operating with the assumption this would be about $1 million a year in debt service and operating costs. And in that second bullet on this slide, I've just listed our different funding or revenue streams rather that we've identified to put towards that debt service and operating cost. Very quickly, we get about $250,000 annually from our cell tower rental revenue. Formerly, that went into a Fund 10 account. This is the first year that it goes directly into our budget. On the E&G side, we record that off. Pouring rights revenue, about $157,000. Solar energy savings that we will be seeing from net energy billing credits, about $300,000 that we would budget specifically towards this. That's not part of our budget yet. We would charge a parking fee premium overnight to students who are living in the residence hall and parking in the garage, and pick up a little north of $100,000 there. We would look at increasing our transportation fee across the board by 10%, another 110. And then that conference revenue premium I've cited as $100,000. It's really a plug. We get about $600,000 in conference revenue annually. That line of operation stands to benefit considerably from the Portland campus development and certainly would utilize the existing parking. Frankly, conferences put a lot of pressure on our existing parking right now. So I think we would be able to draw from that as well, very responsibly. Given that thought, I just wanted to back up and talk about where we are in terms of our current authorization. Little more than a year ago, the Board of Trustees, this committee and then the Board of Trustees authorized expenditures of up to $400,000 for design and permitting. That authorization included another $800,000 at the Chancellor and Vice Chancellor's discretion for $1.2 million total. And I've just cited that authorization in italics there. At this point, we've spent about $170,000. We expect that the permitting process and inclusive of schematic design will cost another $500,000, and that's what we'll be entering into later this month and early next month. We have received authorization from the Chancellor at this point to exceed that $400,000 level. We expect that the permitting and the schematic design will cost about $500,000. So I've noted there that we expect to exceed that $400,000 threshold later this month, early next month. Our building committee is projecting the need for additional authorized spending later this year prior to project bidding, but not for a while. And that's why this is strictly informational. I just wanted to make sure this was out in front of the committee. As far as transportation demand management goes, in the interest of time, I'm just going to skip this slide, Chair Donnelly, but it's an aggressive plan. Our sustainability director, Aaron Witham, is leading it and doing an excellent job. More than happy to answer questions on it, but I can say I have a lot of confidence in what we're doing in that regard in the city of Portland. Both has high standards and was really pleased with our plan. So just to wrap this up, Desmond expects to complete their schematic design in early June with submissions to the city in May. I'd probably back those up to July and June at this point. We expect about 6 to 8 months in the permitting process. We've tried to be conservative about that, just knowing sometimes these processes can take longer than we expect it did on the other project. On the other hand, as long as we can break ground by next March or so, we should be just fine. The construction cycle for this project would be about 12 to 14 months rather than the 26-month construction cycle that we have now. And of course, the goal would be to marry up completion of the garage with the overall development project. And I think we'd be in good shape to do that if we stay on the track we're on right now. So happy to answer any questions, Chair Donnelly, but that's just a hitting the high points update of where we are.
Thank you, Alec. Any questions of the trustees? Thank you, Alec. I'll just throw, I was volunteering the other day and happened to be working with somebody who lives in the neighborhood of USM. And in conversation, we're very complimentary of President Cummings and the campus outreach on keeping the neighbors up to date on everything that we're doing, when we're going to do it, and making sure that they have a voice in the process. And he was super complimentary of that. I thought I'd pass it along because you always hear the complaints and not always the compliments.
And thank you, Chair Donnelly. And the neighborhood does seem very happy as we shifted off Falmouth Street and moved over to Wish Campers.
Thank you. Next up, tab 11, capital project status report and bond projects update. Carolyn McDonough, Director of Capital Planning and Project Management.
Thank you, Chair Donnelly, and good morning, everyone. I will be as brief as possible on this, and just wanted to bring a few items to everyone's attention. The report, as you see, currently reflects for the capital projects about 18 projects. And if you look at the graphs that we include in the summary report, the second graph shows the number of projects declining over the past year and the value of the approved authorization of those projects significantly increasing. In fact, we're looking at over $200 million in authorized projects right now, which is over four times where we were 2 years ago, and probably more than 3 times what we were authorized at just a year ago. So a pretty significant amount of work going on. Also, looking at those graphs, the first graph, the colorful one, I just wanted to note that the information in that graph lags behind the authorization graph by, probably one cycle as funding gets input into the financial system. So you'll see another big jump in that one likely at the next meeting. Other things I wanted to bring to the attention of the committee, especially the pandemic impact on construction and construction status in general right now. We've reported previous projects, as we've reported previously, projects have continued across the system. And as you can see by these graphs, we're doing a lot of work right now. And a couple of the projects that were initially placed on hold are now coming back to us, such as UMA's Randall Hall and the Wish Camper parking project at USM, which we've talked about today. But I will caution that, as a few people have also noted today, and everyone's probably heard in the news, pricing, material shortages, labor shortages, and other things are impacting. They continue to come up in discussions. We're currently holding our ground on the projects that are underway, but especially in the projects that are in planning. I fear there might be some impact there coming, but we are holding our ground, and I'm just bringing that up as a note for future reference. Regarding the bond project list, we changed a little bit around the format there and placed the projects that have been completed in a separate section at the bottom. That's the major change there. We are currently showing 44 active projects with a total of $41 million of the $49 million in bond funding underway. Excuse me, and an additional $12 million leveraged in addition to those projects. There are a number of updates on individual projects and initiatives in the report as well, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have on those.
Thank you, Carolyn. Any questions for Carolyn? Seeing none, thank you for the update. And the last item, tab 12, the one-year capital plan summary. I think we were going to abbreviate this one, but any comments or questions, Carolyn or Ryan?
I would just say yes, Vice Chancellor Ryan, sorry, Lowe, did provide a lot of that information in his report. Happy to answer any questions, but there is a market increase in the amount of funding projected for this year than there has been in the last few years. So,
thank you. Oh, that was the most succinct. 2 thumbs up from Ryan, Carolyn. Good job. Any questions, comments from any of the trustees? And I will thank the trustees and all on the call for robust discussions, great comments, and a good look forward. And with that, Ellen, am I correct in saying we are at the end of the agenda and we're ready to adjourn? And so no motion is needed. I will thank everybody for their time this morning, attention, and great interaction. Have a great day and look forward to seeing you at